You're listening to the Renegade Blitz, the best podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at RBlitzPod, and at Blitz Videos. Read articles on RenegadeBlitz.com, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app.
All right, we're live now. Okay, welcome back to the Renegade Blitz podcast. This is Chris Ward, and I'm joined by Brandon Walker as always. I'm filling in for Ty Polk today, as he usually does the intros. As you know, as you can see, I'm doing it the intro here. But we are joined by Ryan Scarpino tonight, who used to work in the Steelers Public Relations Department. We had Ryan on last year around this time to talk about Troy Polamalu going into the Hall of Fame, along with Bill Cowher, Donnie Shell, Alan Faneca, and Bill Nunn. But thanks for coming on again, Ryan. We're excited to have you on.
Anytime, guys. I really appreciate the invite, and let's get down to business.
Yeah. Well, let's dive right into the what happened on Sunday night. The Steelers lost to the Chiefs, 42-21. What did you think of the game and overall the Steelers' 2021 season? Really shocking that they even made the playoffs without going 9-7-1.
Yeah, if you look at the numbers, and I know numbers don't mean everything, but it is pretty crazy that this team got the 9 wins. I really do think that those first 4 games, they started 1-3, and I think that we all thought they'd be 2-2. But then, they came home, beat Seattle, Denver and Seattle, to get the 500 heading into the bye. And then at one point they beat the Bears, and then they tied the Lions, and it looked like pretty much everything since that Lions game. It was just a roller coaster. But no need to apologize for getting in. To be honest, there were a lot of optimism amongst fans. Lots of optimism amongst fans heading into that playoff game, and I wasn't too optimistic. But when TJ Watt picked up that fumble and went to the end zone, I was like, wait a minute here. But there wasn't enough on offense. I think maybe if they had 7-10 before TJ did that, they might have had a chance. But 5 straight touchdowns by the Chiefs, and it stinks. But again, they made the playoffs where they probably shouldn't have. Any seasons that doesn't end in a Super Bowl is a failure, and Mike Tomlin has made that perfectly clear. But this team's at a crossroads right now, and there's some important decisions that need to be made sooner rather than later. It sounds like Kevin Colbert is retiring, which I think is a huge loss. But I think he's going to leave the team in pretty good shape before he, as Chuck Noll would say, gets on with his life's work. But yeah, a tough ending to the season. But the Chiefs are really, really good, and they might not be as good as they have been in the past, but they're still the Chiefs. It's still Patrick Mahomes.
All right, yeah. Well, speaking of the weird stats, they finished with a minus 76 point differential throughout the season. How do you feel about that? Because that was crazy. That most teams don't make the playoffs with that. That's more of like a 7-10-ish record.
Yeah, there's obviously an extra game this year, but the record for just the regular season is the Seattle Seahawks in 2010, and they actually won. They beat the Saints at home. Marshawn Lynch, you remember that run? Who can forget that? But when you're talking a full-length team that made the playoffs, the Steelers have the 4th worst point differential of all time. And I tweeted this the other day, but off the top of my head, it was the 2011 Broncos. The Tebow-led Broncos were the worst. Then that 2010 Seahawks. And then I think it was like the 2004 Rams. Then it was the Steelers. And then it was actually this year's Raiders. So
that's the Raiders had a worse. So they're probably 5th.
Yeah, so the Steelers had minus 76, and then the Raiders were like minus 60 something or minus 72. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Okay.
But but it's funny that I just mentioned that list because all three the 3 worst point differentials by a playoff team ever, they all won their wild card game. The Steelers and Raiders didn't. So, it really does. Again, we go back. It doesn't really matter necessarily how you get in, because you never know what could happen. Unfortunately, luck was not on the Steelers' side this past Sunday. But again, it's pretty crazy that they got there with 9 wins and they actually had a negative 55-point differential before that Chiefs game. So still, I mean, that's incredible to get in.
Was that their worst point differential since like 1988? Was it, or was it a little sooner than that?
I'd have to go back and look. It was definitely the worst under Mike Tomlin, and I think that it was definitely the worst since their last losing season in 2003. But that's one thing. I didn't go back to the 80s because it was just it just sort of it popped off the page so quickly. But I would say that I was only 2. I don't remember those 80s days. My first memories of the Steelers are like Cowher joining when I was like 4 or 5, and they've pretty much been a successful they've always been since the 70s, but since Cowher took over, it's sort of they're always in contention, even though they had some rough patches after Chuck or in the later days of Chuck Noll.
And another stat that really stood out on the season, the Steelers' brutal run defense. They ranked last in the league. They also ranked last in yards per carry allowed. So, and they got dominated on both sides of the line of scrimmage, which is really, I thought, the story of their season. Really, Kendrick Green struggled, and there was a young offensive line. Adrian Clem, he went out to Oregon, before the season even ended. So it was definitely a difficult season on both lines of the side of the scrimmage. Was that the worst run defense ever in Steelers history?
Yeah, they let up the most. Even I'm pretty sure even without the 17th game, it was the worst rush defense in in team history. And it's crazy because I started there in 2010, and you just didn't run the ball against the Steelers. You might have tried, but you just couldn't do it. So it's a historically bad rush defense. And I talked about that Lions game earlier. They let up 200 yards of rushing to the Lions, and they ended up letting 200 yards in a game 4 times. That's the most in a season since the 50s. And it's strange to me because they got guys on that line. Cam and TJ, Chris Wormley, I thought had a really good year. Loudermilk is a rookie. Montravius Adams was a heck of a find. And Alex Highsmith. So, I think that their inside linebackers hurt them a lot. But yeah, it was just such a strange year because, how you can tell Cam isn't happy about it, but Cam was drafted in 2011, and he's sort of that last person on defense that was around sort of the older, the Farriers, the Harrisons, the Polamalu's, etc. And I know he isn't happy, but one player can't do it all. But it was just really bad. It was a bad rush defense this year. Again, 9 wins, playoffs, crazy.
All right, yeah. Let's talk about one Benjamin Todd Roethlisberger, his final season. How do you feel about his progressive? How do you think he did this year?
They had the most, fourth quarter comebacks and, game-winning drives in a single season of his career. And, you couldn't have gone out better, beating the Browns at home, beating the Ravens on the road. Yeah, it didn't look good in Kansas City, but, in my opinion, even though Ben threw 30 touchdowns, I think he had 34 touchdowns last year, ever since that elbow injury, it's just been short. That vertical passing game has been non-existent for 2 years. Ben was rarely going in the middle of the field. There were times this year when Ben got hit and I didn't think he was getting back up, but, kudos to him because he could have walked away this year. I think he really wanted to give it one last try. And, there was just so many different components, a young offensive line, a rookie running back, Juju getting hurt. But, Ben fought the whole season. Again, I didn't think there were times he was getting up, but he was getting crushed. That offensive line had its moments, but they really didn't have a running game. Even though Najee did well, they really didn't have a running game other than Najee. They were, I think, bottom 5 in rush offense. But, it stinks to see Ben go. He gave it his all for 18 years. I thought he did okay this season. it was cool to see him, win those final two. But yeah, he definitely had his moments of good, and he definitely had his moments of bad. But you usually see that unless you're Tom Brady, but Drew Brees really struggled last year. Peyton Manning struggled in his final year. Eli Manning struggled in their final years. It just happens. He's almost 40 years old. He's been doing this for a long time. But I wish Ben the best, and I thank him for his efforts. He was really, really good. Probably the greatest quarterback in Steelers history, depending on what era you prefer. But he's an all-time Steelers legend, obviously, and he'll take his place in Canton in 5 years, rightfully so.
And the Steelers are in a tough position now, trying to find a quarterback to replace Roethlisberger. Do you think Mason Rudolph will be QB1 in 2022? And should the Steelers do you think the Steelers should have done a better job of having a better plan following Roethlisberger's time, or do you think Rudolph is the most the best decision? Or do you think they there was talk about getting a big name like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson would be surprising, but then there's other quarterbacks like mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo or Derek Carr. So what do you think about the future at the quarterback position?
Yeah, I actually tweeted this earlier. That's my Twitter handle. If anybody cares, I tweet stats and the occasional commentary. But, I don't necessarily understand sort of like the hate. Maybe it's not hate, but people don't like Mason. And, he's drafted in 2018. They didn't have a quarterbacks coach in 2018. Randy was the O coordinator and quarterbacks coach. He was third on the depth chart in 2018 behind Josh Dobbs. Ben gets hurt in 2019, and all of a sudden, here you go, kid. Have at it, Mason. And he got crushed by Earl Thomas in that Ravens game. Remember when they had to take the face mask off of him, and he just had his helmet on. And then a couple weeks later, Myles Garrett smacks him with a helmet. Like, he just had a really, really rough patch. And even this year with the Lions game, he didn't look fantastic, but Deontay Johnson fumbled, Pat Freiermuth fumbled. They gave up 200 yards rushing to the Lions. So, Najee is the best player on offense, not the quarterback anymore. And Ben probably was the best player on offense, or if not the best, tied for the best for a long, long time. So in my opinion, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. You got to build that offensive line. You got to establish the run. You got to get a competent running back to spell Najee. I picked this up earlier today. The Steelers are the only team in the league where they didn't have two running backs with 60 touches. Najee had 381 touches and Benny Snell had 38. Every other team had at least two running backs with 65 touches. So they got to get a running back that can, I'm not saying it's Tony Pollard, but a Tony Pollard type from the Cowboys. It's fast, that can scoot, a change of pace. So that being said, why not just give Mason a shot? They're at 20. 20's no man's land in the draft. I like Kenny Pickett. I don't think he'll be there at 20, but I don't necessarily know if Kenny Pickett's going to be great in the NFL. I just think you can't reach this quarterback class as whatever. Jimmy G, you mentioned. Jimmy G has a cap hit of 20+ million. I wouldn't hate Derek Carr, but Coach Thomas stresses quarterback mobility. And there were plenty of times in that Bengals game that Carr could have ran and he didn't. I just look at this as like, build up the line, get back to the run, and see what Mason has. And if it doesn't work out in a year, then okay, you probably have a higher draft pick. Maybe you can bring somebody in free agency. Maybe you could draft somebody. But I think they should give Mason a shot. He's been here before. I think Canada's coming back. I'm interested to see how Canada does without Ben. And that's not a slight against Ben. I'm just saying I'm interested to see how Canada does with a different type of quarterback. But I think they should give Mason a shot. But they should also keep their options open in case something happened. Aaron Rodgers is not coming here. Russell Wilson's not coming here. None of those big names are coming here. But, again, I would take a Derek Carr.
All right, okay. You talked about Matt Canada staying, so we're going to change course a little. What about Kevin Colbert? How do you think the football operations is going to play out? I wrote on Blitzburg that about a week ago that Mike Tomlin should have more personnel say, maybe be head of football operations. How do you feel about, since you've been there with Omar Khan and Brandon Hunt, how do you think you feel about them stepping up or them making a collaborative effort for while Tomlin runs the operations and they handle the business and negotiations and stuff like that. Tomlin, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, and excuse me, I always think it's always sort of been a three-headed monster. It's always been Art II, Coach Tomlin, and Kevin Colbert making those decisions. First of all, for Kevin Colbert, mentor and a friend, you can't replace Kevin Colbert as a person or as a worker. His history of consistency is just off the board. I think he definitely deserves some Hall of Fame recognition in being in that conversation. I did talk about this the other day. I was saying that maybe the Steelers need to look outside the organization for certain things. And I was talking like assistant coach wise. Doesn't look like they're going to go that route. It's fine. That's the Steelers' MO. They like to hire from within. So that being said, I think that if I was the Steelers, I would I'd go back to sort of a three-pronged approach with Coach Tomlin. Brandon Hunt, who's a Pittsburgh guy. Brandon Hunt is one of the smartest football people I've ever been around. He's been at the Steelers a long time. He also was with the Houston Texans, and he's basically their top player personnel person. So he would get the bump. You have Omar staying, and then it's sort of like a four-headed monster. You got Art, Omar, Brandon Hunt, and Coach Tomlin making those decisions. I think it's smart. They've all been there a very long time. They're all really good talent evaluators. And I think that that would bode well for them to keep those folks.
A little bit more on the coordinators. Because Keith Butler, Tomlin said that Butler's been talking about retirement, so he could be replaced this season. So who do you think will be a candidate to? Do you think they'll go outside, or do you think they'll promote like Terrell Austin to defensive coordinator?
Yeah, first of all, Butt's a great person, and I think he's a great coach. Unfortunately, the defense just didn't show up in big moments, these last playoff games. And, I don't know who that's on, and I'm not placing the blame, but I know Butts, is a great coach and a hard worker. And so I just wanted to, give credit to him. He's been in this a long time. So if he does retire and hang it up, kudos to him. Did a great job. I think that Terrell Austin being promoted is the right choice, and this actually move has been in the works for a while. He was brought on board in 2019, and the talk at the time was that he was eventually going to be promoted. Austin has he was from Sharon, but he went to Pitt, had a lot of stints, but he coached for the Ravens, Lions, Bengals, so he has AFC North experience. And the one thing that I would like to highlight was, he made Detroit's defense one of the top in the league for, I think it was 1 year. I think it was that 2014 year, but that's saying a lot because that franchise is sort of, whatever, and it's been whatever for a long time. But the other thing I'd like to say about him is that he has been interviewed for head coaching vacancies for many years now. And to me, that shows that, people obviously do their homework and people look at his resume, and I think it speaks for itself. And I think that, him sort of being under, Coach Butler and being with Coach Tomlin for a couple years now, I think that's a no-brainer, and I think that's an easy promotion. And again, I did say I'd like to maybe see them look outside the organization for maybe position coaches. But, I think it is what it is, but I'm fine with Austin getting the nod, and I'm okay with Canada staying just to see what he can do for this year. But after this year, and he can, that's a tough one. But yes, I'm all for Austin getting that bump, and he did deservedly so.
Yeah, I could definitely see like the point of Canada needing like a mobile quarterback, or at least somebody that can move. Because Ben, the last 2 years and this year with Canada as the coordinator, he just didn't have his mobility. So I do see that point where Canada was kind of held back in a sense, but I agree that I think this year is really critical for him.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan. All right, we have like things on what the biggest need: upgrading the offensive line. We could use a speed receiver and some more depth. We got James Washington as a free agent and Juju as a free agent. You need a shutdown corner. You need to settle your middle linebacker position. How do you think that's going to play out in the free agency, in the draft, or whatever the case may be. Put it this way: 20th. What player do you like at 20?
So
if you had a choice.
I mean, Linderbaum from Iowa, and I don't think he's going to be there. And I think it's a perfect Pittsburgh name. But in my opinion, 20's no man's land. It's tough. You don't know. I mean, sort of how the top, maybe 10 picks are going to play out, or at least you mock it that way. But I think the first things first, they have to get an offensive lineman, and I'm talking like a Pouncey-esque, somebody that's going to be there for 10 seasons, tough, physical. The other thing the Steelers have working in their favor this year is that I believe they have 7 picks, so I don't think that they're going to trade picks. I don't think they have a lot of, draft capital to be able to do that. So they have 7 draft picks, but they also have a good amount of cap space, and they haven't had cap space like this in a long time. I think their biggest needs, though, as you said, they need to solidify that offensive line. They need to address middle linebacker. They need a speedy wide receiver, and I say speedy as in like, wow, that dude's fast. I would re-sign. Yeah, Mike Wallace. I know Deshaun Jackson's a little bit older, but he can still fly. Just somebody that keeps defenses honest. Martavis Bryant, for a recent Steeler that was super fast. They need a speedy wideout. They need a running back that's could spell Najee. They need not, and no, and this isn't any disrespect to anybody on the team, but it's just, they obviously didn't trust Benny Snell enough to be able to put him in a position to get that many touches. As I mentioned earlier, the lack of touches for our backups. I'd sign Juju. I'd sign Witherspoon. I'd probably bring back Joe Hayden if the price was right. Middle linebacker. I think, to be fair, I think their front seven's okay with Tyson Alualu coming back. Stephon Tuitt might come back. I don't think their needs. I don't think my needs are are different from everybody else's and what they think the Steelers should do. But they need to be smart about who they're bringing in. And if it's going to be a good fit. Again, having cap space, they might be able to finally bring in some veterans, and not only veteran players, but veteran leaders, because now that Ben's gone, you got your Cam Haywards of the world. TJ's 5-6 years now. Juju's 5-6 years now, but they need some veterans in there as well that have played in this league.
And Ryan, what do you think of the receiver play this year? Deontay Johnson had a really good season, but he fixed the drop issues. Then they kind of appeared late in the season in the playoff game, and then Chase Claypool was hard to figure out. He kind of had like a sophomore slump. He only had 2 touchdown receptions. So, and as Brandon mentioned, the speedy receiver, they need someone, because Johnson was really the only receiver who created any type of separation.
Oh man, like watching Deontay run routes sometimes is just it's just like, wow, like that guy could just separate it. I thought Deontay had a really good year. He still had some drops. I think he'll get better. Drops stink, but I know he's worked his butt off. Chase regressed in his second year, and to be fair, he faced a lot of criticism, and I think a lot of that was brought on himself. I think he heard that noise, and I think it impacted him. He needs to work on his mechanics and get back to basics. He always looks awkward going for the ball. He stops when he shouldn't stop. He jumps when he shouldn't jump. He dives when he should dive. So, but I think that, I think he could bounce back. I think James Washington's gone, and I think that's good for both sides. I never quite understood why him and Ben were just never on the same page. He led the team in receiving yards in 2019 when Ben was out. Freiermuth had a great rookie season. He obviously became Ben's go-to guy. I don't know if I could put a grade on the receivers. And obviously Juju got hurt. Kudos to him for coming back. But I do think if you re-sign Juju, you got Juju, Chase, Deontay. I think that's a pretty good trio. You got, Freiermuth coming back. Maybe you can add a veteran tight end for cheap. But then I think if you get, a super fast receiver, I think that's a pretty decent group. And if you give them a whole off season with Mason or whoever that is, solidify the line, I think that they could be decent on offense next year. Not great, but they don't have to be great because I think they could be great on defense.
You got that depends on that linebacker position. We have a certain individual, man, the name of Devin Bush, that they traded up 2 picks for some draft capital a couple years ago. And let's just say this season has been less than impressive. So do you think that is it because of the injury, or is he not dedicating himself as much as he should, or a little bit of both? Because it seemed like he couldn't do anything right. I was shocked that he got that pick during the wild card game.
Yeah. Well, that was all because number 90's one of the best in the business. But so it's funny because Devin's rookie year, every time the ball was loose, he was there. Like that 2019 season, he had that was a fumble. Was that Rivers pass and it's in LA? He had an incredible pick on Mark Andrews. He had a fumble recovery against the Seahawks. Like that dude's first 4 or 5, 6 games, he was just unbelievable. And then, obviously last year he got hurt and he missed the rest of the year. And I'm fortunate. I've never played at this level, let alone had a serious football injury. So I can't say whether he was at 100%. I really don't know. Look at Zach Banner. He was able to, I'm assuming able to play for a long time, and he really didn't play. I don't know if that's just because they thought they had better options on the line, but it has to be really hard coming back from an ACL injury. Some guys do it quicker than others. Some guys, come back to the same level. Some guys don't, but I don't think Joe Schobert's going to be back next year. I think he has a pretty big cap hit, and I don't really know if he did enough this year to show me that. So if you're looking at Devin in a year where he really needs to prove it, that's a lot of weight on his shoulders. And then to have maybe Robert Spillane, Buddy Johnson was on IR, but they need some depth and they need a playmaker, and I really do think that they need to draft a guy like Vince Williams. I think that was a big loss for them this year when he retired. He was the closest thing to the 70s Steelers linebacker, and I do think there is still a place for those physical types in this game, and I do think maybe Devin not sort of having that type of guy with him, especially when he was coming off an injury, hurt him. But I wish him the best, and we can only wait and see what happens.
And, speaking of number 90, TJ Watt, at all times point that he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, unless they give it to Aaron, the Associated Press gives it to Aaron Donald. I think this is Watt's year, but, he tied Michael Strahan for the single season NFL sack record with 22.5 sacks. He's been mentioned with Reggie White in some of these stats. I mean, just an incredible year for TJ Watt. So what were your thoughts on his 2021 season, and do you think they should have gave him that sack, or do you think the statisticians made the right decision?
Yeah, the week before against Cleveland, there was a sack that they credited to TJ, and I thought that it should have been a team sack. And I know Steelers fans were upset because it's the Baltimore press box, but I do think that the rule was officiated appropriately, and tying Michael Strahan, to me is a huge accomplishment. The tie was a good sack. It was legit, it wasn't Brett Favre falling down for it. The craziest thing, and this is not a slight on TJ because he's incredible, but TJ actually only had 1 sack his last 4 regular season road games, and he still had 22.5 sacks this year. So, I believe it's like 51 or 2 of his sacks have come in 40 home games. And then his road sack numbers are like 22 sacks in 36 games, which is great. But he's just so dominant at home. As much as it's an individual award, I think voters do look at team success. There's only like one player to ever win it on a losing team, and that was Jason Taylor with the Dolphins. I know the Steelers didn't have a losing team, but they struggled overall on defense. I just don't see them not giving it to TJ. I think he'll get it, and I think it's well-deserved. And like I said, man, I mean, there were, 2 games that he missed, and there were a couple games he didn't have a sack. I mean, he might have had 25 sacks this year. That's crazy. I mean, next year, if he plays a full season, he might hit 25.
Yeah.
All right. What is your favorite Ben moment throughout your time with the Steelers, being a fan, working in an organization?
Man, wow, that's a really, really good question. I would just say I'll say I have two moments. One is my first year there was 2010, and I started the week he was he was accused of some things off the field, and it was just a really, really, really weird time. I remember like my first couple of weeks there, I was like, wow, I was an intern. I was like, wow, what did I get myself into? Like, it was just like, I don't know what happened, but you still had to work through those things. And he was suspended for those first 4 games. We went 3-1, and then he comes back and like took us to the Super Bowl. And I know we lost, but like, he's been the quarterback 18 years, which is pretty much half my life. And then half of that, I got to work with him. So it's been cool. It's been a great experience. So that first year, him leading us to the Super Bowl, I'm grateful for that, because they never got to the Super Bowl after that. They haven't been there since. And that was, I remember it was my first year there, and it was such a remarkable experience. My other favorite Ben moment was those back-to-back 6-touchdown performances against the Colts and Ravens in 2014. And just, I mean, watching that from the press box, I mean, that dude was just dialed in. Like, I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to compare him to somebody like Mahomes or because they're two totally different players. But like, when a guy like Rodgers or Mahomes or Brady's locked in, I'm fortunate enough to say that like that was Ben locked in. You could not stop him that day. And those were two pretty good football teams that year. And I mean, he just single-handedly just demolished both of them.
This will probably be our last question. But just I want to know, a few weeks back there, the Ben's final game at Heinz Field. What did you think of that moment? That was pretty something else. I never seen anything like that. And ESPN, they did a great job catching those footage, like him going out in the tunnel, leaving the stadium with the family. That was a really good shot there.
Yeah, for as horrible as the Browns played, it was a little shaky at the end. They cut it to 1 score, and there wasn't a lot of time left on the clock, but the Browns defense was actually playing pretty well. And, it was actually cool to see Najee with the house call, because Ben came into the league not as a thrower, right? I mean, he had a different coach, but he relied on Jerome and guys like Jerome and Willie Parker. And see Najee sort of, cap it off with that touchdown. It was kind of like, wow, like, Ben sort of going out like he came in, but then they get a pick and he gets the kneel. I mean, you couldn't have written it any better. But next week he beats the Ravens on the road in the fourth quarter comeback. I mean, what a cool ending to his career, and an all-time great Steeler, an all-time great in the NFL. And yeah, it sucks we didn't win a couple more, but we 2-time Super Bowl champion, and I mean, I think the greatest throw in Super Bowl history to Santonio Holmes. Pretty cool.
Brandon, that's all we got, pretty much, right?
All right, real quick, 30 seconds.
Get me out of here.
Divisional champion. I mean, divisional round winners.
Ooh, I think the Bengals are banged up on the defensive line, and I think the Titans. I think the Titans get one by 3-4. So I got the Titans winning by 3-4. I have the Packers by 6. I think that'll be closer than people think. San Francisco's been playing well. I got the Rams by a field goal over. Actually, no. Here's my sleeper. I got the Rams by a touchdown over the Buccaneers. I don't think Brady gets it done this year. As soon as I say that, he's going to win a Super Bowl again. And then I got the Bills beating the Chiefs again. I think both those teams are locked in. But I think the Bills are going to show up. I think this is their year, and I will say it's going to be Packers-Bills Super Bowl.
Thanks.
There you go. There's the prediction, Ryan. As we sign out, Ryan, what's your Twitter handle that people could follow you at? A lot of good. Ryan always tweets a lot of good stats, and we're always retweeting him. A lot of good stuff. Got a lot of good info there.
Yeah, it's at Scarpizio at SCARPIZIO.
There you have it, everyone. Thanks for listening, everybody, and thanks, Ryan, for coming on again. We always enjoy having you on.
Awesome, guys. Anytime. I really appreciate it. Keep up the good work, and yeah, it's gonna stink. Got to wait around for this for 8 months after the Super Bowl, but that's the sacrifices you make.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at @RBlitzPod, and at Blitz Videos. Read articles on renegadeblitz.com, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. The Renegade Blitz podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you can listen to podcasts.